All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. These are your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Eloy Escojedo, coming from the west and east coast of the United States and creating a big s'mores, s'mores bar in the middle. Um,
Why not?
we, you said keep it pleasant, and I'm like,
No. I didn't mean, patronizing. I just, something light. I'm kind of the sentimental one of the bunch here. And not to say that you're not, but when holidays roll around like this, like last week, we did the pre Christmas show. And this, if we want to hold to tradition, is our pre New Year's show. So happy 2023, y'all. 3 days early, 4 days early. Geez, I can't even remember how many days in the month anymore. Don't get old. It's not for the week. 4 days from now, 5 days from now. You know when it's the first, and don't, anyway.
mhm.
So I start doing things about like, well, gee, what would we do for New Year's? And then it hit me, do we have to do anything for New Year?
Do we have to
Well,
do anything at all?
no, we don't have to, but I think it would be kind of I don't know, churlish of us to not even at least acknowledge it.
Acknowledge time, the passage of time.
Yeah, we made one more trip around the sun, and
That's what
so
they
far,
claim. No, that's the claim.
yeah.
I
Well,
want to see.
sometimes they're right. you know, so it's oh, Robin's out here. Karaoke party. Yeah, that ain't gonna happen.
I count my year rotations as rotations around the refrigerator throughout the
Yeah,
year. So
there you go.
I add those up, and then I say, oh, okay, a year's passed.
I was having an online conversation with my cousin back in North Carolina a little bit early, and we kind of got on that. I said it's um, she posted a meme that says all I got for Christmas was fatter. And
Mm.
I'm like, oh, you too. I'm glad I'm not the only one. It's my mission to try to resemble a weeble by the time I'm 70, and I'm well on my way. So it's short-term goals, and I'm well on my way. I'll get there because I figure I've only got one person to impress, and long as she ain't saying nothing, I'm fine with the way I am. I'm very happy with me right now. But I still, it's the time of year when folks look back. It's the time they look ahead. Oh boy, 2023 is coming and a whole new year, and there's hope and this, that, and the other. I don't know why we do that. I tend to look back and try to figure out what happened. You know, and I kind of get into the wondering, are we better off now than we were going into 2022? Because I remember last year we were coming out of all the quarantines and all the lockdowns and the COVID this and that and the other. So I guess that would be my first question. Do you think things for the most part, generally speaking, have returned to normal since the whole COVID thing started? More or
No,
less.
no, it's no. I think that. See, I don't want to. We have to keep this light, right? Roughly.
Well.
Okay. Do you want me to tell the truth, or do you want me to do what polite people do in public places
Well,
while purchasing small fruit at your local convenience grocery store?
well, number one, if you're buying your fruit at a convenience store, that may be part of the issue. But you know, what I'm getting at is people aren't walking around wearing masks anymore. They're not afraid to shake hands anymore. They're not afraid to touch doorknobs anymore. It's not. We're not doing the when in trouble, when in doubt, run in circles, scream and shout dance anymore. So, is that your experience there, or is
Oh my goodness, Mark. Oh my goodness, Mark. Mark, if I were to be honest with you and everyone watching and
Mhm.
opened up the Pandora's box,
Mhm.
um number one, I don't know if you'd have to commit me to some sort of padded room or something, but I can participate socially and be agreeable, and not open up the things that I see. But my goodness, Mark. Yes, okay, so let's look for the positive. So within the positive, there is more activity. Yes, it is true that there are, well, we never had a full-blown lockdown necessarily, because in Florida our governor did not allow for such things, but we did see a little bit of restrictions in certain areas. But we did have a downgrade of our quality of food and services
Yeah.
and such. Has it returned from what we saw in the beginning of the year? Um, if I had to be fair without thinking about it too long, but generalizing, I would say it's about a good 80 visually as a shopper's experience. From the viewpoint of a shopper, I would have to say about 80 to 85% back, minus the
Mhm.
food. If you talk to me about food, it's at 30% quality.
Yeah.
As per what I remember it, it was wonderful in the past. We
Yeah.
had it all.
Yeah,
We had
I,
it.
I will agree with you there. I see Robin saying, now she's in Canada. I'm not exactly sure where you are in Canada, Robin, but they still wear masks here.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of um, very, very, very few places, I haven't seen anybody in a mask in a long, long time. It's been several months. It just slowly started to dwindle down, and the signs came off of the doors, must be wearing a mask in here and all that. Okay, Robin's in Ottawa. Okay, so folks are still wearing masks in Ottawa. Now, and again, I live in a fairly small valley, so maybe we're just kind of isolated here, but I haven't seen anybody in a mask in a long, long time. They're not wearing the rubber gloves. They're not hitting the sanitizer stations, the hand sanitizer stations, before they'll touch a shopping cart and wipe down everything, that they may accidentally brush against. Um, uh, it, it, on a social interaction scale, it's more or less returned back to pre-COVID time. It's not. I don't see the panic in people's eyes anymore. You know.
Yeah, but do you see the deer in the headlight look anytime at all when you go out? Oh my goodness, Mark,
Well,
my goodness, man.
when you get onto certain other things, yes, there are certain things that are still empty shelves,
Yeah,
or things are in short supply.
yeah,
There is still the quality of service and quality of food. It's come back. It's coming up, but it's still not there yet. I agree with you there. It's almost like there was a massive shift in the collective conscious here. And I don't know, is it just here? Because I don't get out much. um, in that people just don't care as much as they used to. The pride in doing a good job is not what it was.
mm,
Now, I don't know if that translates to everything. I can't say that it has.
mm,
But in certain industries, um, where you used to have people coming up and asking, do you need help? Are you finding everything? Stuff like that. Now you have to go track them down. They're less likely to approach you and ask you if you need help. If you ask them, they're more than willing to help. But they're not asking you, you finding everything okay? That kind of stuff, you know.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
the
yep,
quality of service, we've gone to a couple of restaurants and the service is still right there. I mean, the servers are still right there and attentive. in any place where they were. I mean, there are some restaurants that I just won't go to because you just about have to, light a fire on your table to get anybody's attention. But the places that had good service before, for the most part, have good service now. And I think it's because the bosses are a little bit more selective over who they want representing their brand, but that may or may not be. So
Yeah. Again, I have to control myself because, frankly, I think a lot of things. Boy, so have things improved? I think I answered it, but
mhm,
just to reiterate, from the beginning to now, they have improved, but
mhm.
that doesn't mean that under the hood, in a real sense, if you see a lot of like fire ants circling a dropped lollipop on the asphalt, you might think due to all the activity that the ants are doing great. I'll just leave that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, there have. I will say it has caused a paradigm shift in that a lot of people who saw that they could work from home because they were forced to, that's now what they want to do. And I'm perfectly fine with that. In fact, I think that's one of the better metrics. Now, some people can't work from home or don't want to work from home. They got to get out of the house, you know. But if you have a job to where you can work from home and you actually succeed in working from home, I I say why not? Go for it. And in fact, some companies have, I mean, we're talking Fortune 500 companies, have seen the benefit to allowing people to work from home. In some cases, in a number of cases, productivity actually went up because people didn't feel like someone was breathing down their neck. They had certain things they had to get done. They got them done on time. And that was what was important. It wasn't that you were physically sitting there at your desk. So a project that might take you 3 hours, you weren't watching the clock, milking until lunchtime, just so you could get away for a half an hour or an hour and come back and pick up another 2 hour task and stretch that till quitting time. Now, so long as those projects were done, it didn't matter to the employer if you were getting them done in 4 hours or 8. The project was getting done.
Yeah.
So I can see how productivity actually went up and customer satisfaction actually went up in a lot of areas. So a paradigm shift in that direction, plus a lot of people just walked away from the workforce. It made them reevaluate their priorities and they said, do I really want to work 10 hours a day for this job, for this wage, with no prospect of moving up? Let me go try something else that I've always wanted to try. And I mean, I'm sure you see it around your neighborhoods with big signs up, help wanted, now hiring, paying such and such an hour.
Yeah, yeah. There's
People are
plenty.
begging for employees.
Yeah, there's plenty of where before one would have to approach the establishment and inquire. Now it's
Mhm.
the establishment advertising to
Yeah.
draw in new employees. So there is that. But at the same, so at, like fast food chains and whatnot, and I'm sure
Right.
other places. But things like Home Depot, there's less employees
Yes.
on the floor, so it's like they're cutting a little bit of the extra the extra help in these different businesses, and so
Well,
yeah, I mean, I'm seeing that. I mean, the shelves are roughly fully stocked again. Um, and there's a lot of movement back and forth. People have the resilience apparently of, I mean, well, we've seen it of,
mhm.
like getting back up on their feet because if you think of the 20th century, with all the wars from, World War One, Second World War, Korean War, Vietnam, and all the other things in between, all the other wars, like
Yeah.
just the Spanish Civil War, Cuba, and the early things that I'm studying. But there were other things happening
Mhm.
in other locations across the world, and people in the middle of a rubble of a leveled city or town or whatnot, rock by rock, broom sweep by broom sweep, seem to sort of pick up the pieces, um, bury the dead, and sort of like move on forward. It looks like.
Well, I think that may be an inherent human trait, in that pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get on with it. I mean, yeah, there is a point of futility, and then you got to go somewhere else. But it's like when you look at the number of people who are displaced by hurricane or tornado or fire or earthquake or anything like that. Yes, they're incredibly traumatized at the moment. And yes, they're incredibly sad, because depending upon the level of damage, they may have lost everything they own. And yes, they have to start over, but they are able to start over.
Mm-hmm.
The human drive to succeed is still a part of it. Now, let's see what you think here. Uh, Robin said, I know it sounds like I'm picking on Robin. It's just you're coming up with interesting statements and questions here, Robin. I'm not picking on you, believe me. She says the pride in doing a good job has left the youth. Now, I have a question about that. Do you see that? Do you think that's the case?
If I told you what's the case, it's going to open up a huge
Well,
Pandora's
I'm just
box.
asking for your opinion,
Okay,
because
my opinion. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, no, go ahead.
well,
This is this.
I was just going to say that I think in some cases that's true, but I think in other cases it's kind of been driven out of them.
Okay.
Not because they're young and they don't know what they're doing, and oh, these kids today with their hair and their clothes, and none of that kind of stuff. But when you stop and look at it, I mean, you worked at McDonald's, right?
It was my first job.
Now, I'm not casting aspersions here or anything like that or questioning it, but could you say right here, right now, you took 100% pride in every single thing you did there? Or some of it was just kind of, I got to do this, let's get it over with?
Yeah, most of it
Yeah.
was that. The I learned little lessons. So I what I liked about it was, and I learned this, that you could help solve someone's. I know this sounds ridiculous concerning a burger exchange for money, but I learned you're participating in the process of exchanging things, products for money, and that early on, even though it didn't filter perfectly into my head, but still you're seeing how things go, and you're seeing that the fries have to be repurchased so that the shipment, and you're giving, so you're learning little lessons in this and that. But you're basically a teenager saying, man,
Mm-hmm.
I want to go home where the fun is at, and
Yeah.
stuff. But I did it on my own. Like, I got the job because I wanted money, and so I
Sure.
that's what you do when you. So yeah, so
Yeah.
it's not like I was thrilled,
No.
it's a job.
And to that point, I think it's unreasonable to expect everybody who assembles a Big Mac to place every little strand of lettuce like it's going to be the cover of Time magazine. It's hard to take pride in something you do over and over and over again. Now, that don't mean throw it on the bun from across the room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does need to look decent. But at the end of the day, it's a McDonald's hamburger. You're not expecting something from Michelangelo coming at you through the drive-through in a bag, right?
Yeah.
So I can't say that I took 100% pride in everything I've ever done in my life. There are some things that I've taken a lot of pride in. So I think the pride in doing a good job has kind of shifted to the things that really matter. And I think that paradigm shift of what really matters is what we're seeing the result of. I don't know. What do you think?
Jeez. So I don't want to say it because it's gonna. Well, if you really. Oh my goodness. So, oh crap. I think that every generational or few generations there's shifts. I think that we've had a lot of, mind you,
Mm-hmm.
it's true. The early
Mm-hmm.
20th century had devastating situations because
Mm-hmm.
world wars are
Sure.
not something light, that it affects everything. um I'll say it this way so that it's less outrageous. I'll say it this way. I liked i liked my 1980s America, where you could observe excesses, but there was a lot of traditions that informed people without having to say it, on behavior to a degree. Yes, you had the extreme, but you had this. You there was still old fashionedness left within there enough. So you had modern, but you had some old fashionedness occurring traditional wise, and I think that those things are contagious, and people act according to those things that are just passed on. Just you don't even speak it; it's just passed on
Sure.
as a reflect. And I think that those things were good, in a general sense, and that I think that we've had since the year 2001. When was the Twin Towers?
In 2001, yeah.
Since 2001, plus the new generations coming on, plus the internet, which we always think of as a great thing, and the things that you've talked about in the past, which I may not have given its proper, at the moment, because I'm thinking of the things I'm thinking. I want to put those out,
Sure.
but I think that everything we've talked about concerning these things about moving forward and stuff, I think that not sitting with people in real time and all these things that you've mentioned as well, while you praise the internet, and so do I, but I'm more of a caveman.
Yeah.
um
You act like I'm not.
I think I think that all those things in conjunction, I guess you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
okay.
do.
Yeah.
I do. And that's what I mean by the priority shift, because the world is full of teachers now, if you stop and look at it. And we may not think of ourselves as a teacher, but if I post something on Facebook, however many friends or followers I have, there may be one or two people that'll take something from that. Let's just say I post, I don't know, a picture of a gorilla. Somebody is going to take something from that and think, hey, I learned something. I didn't know there were gorillas in that country. So, I guess what I'm getting at is each one of us, whether we think so or not, we are teachers. And you and I growing up had a limited number of teachers. We had a limited number of people that we learned things from. It started with our parents. Of course, we had school teachers and what have you, but we had parents, we had grandparents, we had cousins and uncles and friends. They had families. And whether you know it or not, you learned something from all of these people, even if it is, don't be like that guy, because I've got a couple in my family that are that way, you know. But now we have so many teachers because the social media influence has grown so big that you never know what somebody's going to take out of somebody's post or somebody's YouTube video or somebody's podcast. Just a little comment that we might make, right now, just kind of half in jest, somebody could take very seriously, and suddenly that becomes fact.
That's another. So that's a good. So that's another thing. So I've mentioned it a lot of, in the past, that when two people converse, um, we're exchanging one word at a time that produces a sentence at a time that
Mhm.
can become a paragraph and so on. And then, but the thing is that the library where all that information is coming from, the brain, from your point of view out towards the world, um, depending on one's level of education, depending on one's level of education, whether informal or formal, the words that one has in their vocabulary briefcase, and how well they can organize a thought, precisely what they're thinking to achieve the goal of handing it to you intact, may vary. And
Yeah.
so a lot of so half our lives are basically negotiations between people, and negotiations doesn't have to be a business transaction. It's a
Sure.
negotiation over an idea,
Right.
over a concept, and we're also testing each other out on. And this is not just us. In every conversation, even a subtle hello to someone in the street, or someone you're about to purchase a candy bar from, if the person says to yourself, you're communicating information
Right.
between each other as to where you are, standoffish. So we're all about negotiations in our conversations, but we can only do so much. So we spend a lot of time trying to get our points across. And here's the thing: we may be illuminated in a concept, but even though, like, I have my focus, but even though I have my illumination in the concepts that I have, that I think would be valuable for those that would think it to
Yeah.
be valuable, I don't have a grasp on every other thing out there.
Right.
So I'm, not competent even in that thing that I think I'm competent in. I'm competent to a level.
Yeah.
And but then, so we're in this whole process. I think, just to wrap that with what you said, I think that even though now we're all teachers, if you look, it could be now or back in the day when we had to actually go to a bookstore or whatever, or communication, like you said, with parents. Maybe your dad or grandfather is teaching you how to fix something, a toilet, or whatever. All these handing off of information and stuff that we hold on to, we could take that one word, like you were saying, or that one sentence as biblical, when
Right.
the person that gave it to us was just an aside within the greater context. But we didn't get we didn't receive the message in that way. We said, oh, this. And so that's how little legends and little things, so it starts to, so we're a spider's web of intelligent interaction between human
Right.
beings that's never quite on point. And um and, and so yeah, so long story short, um the other thing I wanted to say about it was, to wrap it up, is that even though back then we didn't have the internet and all these teachers, if you think back, there was always a slew of people that you would, maybe not, but I would assume that things that you were quite competent in, to a point that you could talk about at least, and it would just not necessarily fly over other people's heads, but it's like they were persona non grata on the issue. They were like, what, you know,
Yeah.
because even back then, people that gravitate towards knowledge on any interest are going to find it.
Yeah.
Whether it's, so somebody today, with all the information we have available, just go out on the street, the things that you look at, like building, reconstructing old French uninhabited structures, how they used to whittle back in ancient whatever, and all these things that you're interested in that are incredible things to another person. Instead of that, replace it with
Yeah.
the next rap song, or whatever. And it's important to, so we have that.
Yeah. And that's what I mean by, you used an interesting analogy, this spider web of information coming in, and every vibration on every ounce, every section of web leads you in a different direction.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why it's so confusing. It's because we have so much input,
A lot.
that we've just reached that portion to where we have to just start withdrawing and say, wait a minute, I can't take this anymore. This is too much coming in all at once. And, I can't fault people. I don't know. We talk about traditions of the old days, and our growing up at this time was the best time. And I think each generation thinks that their childhood was the best childhood. And you know what? Everybody is right. Your
Is it
childhood in the 80s, when you say your childhood was the best, you're absolutely right, because it was the best for you.
right?
You know,
It's my experience.
and mine in the 70s was the best for me because
Right,
it was mine. I mean,
right,
I can't
exactly.
imagine being 6 years old in 1982, just as you can't imagine being 6 years old in 1967.
Yeah, I
The,
mean,
the, the
you could imagine it, but
yeah, well, yeah, but how accurate would your imagination be? You can't remember it, is what I'm getting at.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
it, but I know I'm going all over the place, but I do have a point to get back to. And that is, I really can't blame everything on the youth. Um, McDonald's and Burger King and KFC are having a hard time getting employees. You've done that job. I've done
Mhm.
that job. There's a reason why we don't do it today, because we didn't like that job. Yes, we learned things, but the most important thing we learned from those jobs was we didn't want to do that job for the rest of our lives. So I really can't blame them for that. And who's to say, just because they're not working at McDonald's doesn't mean that they're not working or they're not doing something else. I mean, I have a nephew who I swear it seems like 6 months ago I could have reached down and smacked him. And now he's over 6 feet tall, and he's partnered with a friend of him. They're in the roofing business. So, no, they're not viable members of the workforce because they are self employed. They're
Mhm.
contractors and they're doing pretty good.
Well, let me say this though. There was a time in America and in the world, but let's say America, to keep it a little bit more controlled, because I don't know how far
Mhm.
I don't think I could stretch out beyond the borders on this topic. And even then, but
Mhm.
I'll just say there was a time in America when there was no McDonald's or Taco Bell
Sure.
or what Arthur Treacher's or whatever. People used to. There were fancy restaurants, there were
Mhm.
bars, but people would basically come home to eat.
Mhm.
So that industry was a little bit more curtailed in its scope compared to what we see today. So maybe, I don't think so, because it's so American and it's so entrenched ingrained in our thing. But maybe, due to the demand, or the employment not meeting the demand, they're gonna have to reinvent the wheel. But maybe we go in a different direction. I mean, we don't know where we're.
I think we already are going in a different direction because we had a fast food joint right down the road from us closed down. They never were 100% the best. I mean, we went there every once in a while, but it wasn't the quality of the food that suffered, it was the quality of the service.
That's
They
right.
just couldn't keep employees there for some reason, I don't know. Things turned around last year and they got better. But then all of a sudden, out of the blue, they closed down. They're just, I mean, the building is empty, for lease sign. And it's like, wow, that was a surprise because they were getting better. I mean, crowds were coming back and they were being successful. I don't know why they closed it down. Maybe I don't want to know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that kind of led me to the point that, like what Jim Dockeral was talking about here, a lot of younger people are going their own way. I'm seeing that too, Jim. Doing what was once considered a side hustle and making it a career and succeeding. Yes, I think that may be part of that paradigm shift where people are starting to see that maybe they don't need to go get a 4-year degree to be successful. That somebody is going to have to be like my nephew and get up and replace a roof. I mean, that's a hard job. It's a sucky job. You're out there in the weather. I mean, it's hot in the summer, it's miserable in the winter, but somebody's got to do it. And people need to have it done, and they're willing to pay to have it done. And Neither of these guys have an MBA. They know how to do the work. And so they're doing the work. They're running the business. And I'm seeing that a lot. You're seeing a lot of independents out there doing their thing, whether it be starting up a food truck because it costs 1/8 of what opening a restaurant would be, or starting a company that'll go around and clean swimming pools, or doing whatever. I think Jim is onto something there.
Yeah.
You
There's
know,
there's other things also like that. There's so many things involved with predictions and whatnot, but you can even see. So, for instance, you and I, um, how could I say? Okay, so if you think about language and how language changes, which we have talked about on several occasions,
yeah,
that also and the customs involved in the sharing of information back and forth with people. So you and I, even though we're removed a generation or so
mhm,
through the passage of time, we still have a communication style well within the bounds of what is considered, you know, uh, the same. Let's just say
uh-huh,
point blank the same.
yeah,
Even though we may have regional variations in certain things, like we've talked
oh
about in the
sure,
past, where someone would say soda or this or that, but the communication style, which is attached to also the eras that we
hmm,
grew up in, also are the same. So that plus the language, plus the references to
hmm,
movies and music and so on. So we're kind of glued together in a snapshot in time. What we are,
hmm,
um, even though we have a decade of difference, let's say roughly, um, we're still a snapshot in time, you
right,
and I. But as an example, but you and I, um, as that snapshot in time, is, if I would be so bold to say, quite far removed from where we are today
yeah,
with the passage of quite a few decades, considering the kids today and how they, if you ever go in a chat,
hmm,
because sometimes I cross, like I'll look at some sort of conspiracy thing because I enjoy that
hmm,
conspiracy, and you'll see people talking in language. Maybe they're talking Romulan, I don't know. Maybe they're talking Vulcan, but they sound and they're using words that I would, and they're running on sentences of which I have zero reference points to,
hmm,
and they are prolifically engaged in a conversation about something that makes zero sense to me in the English language. And so I'm
hmm.
thinking to myself, wow, that's an incredible thing. So it's denoting the passage of time and how things shift.
Well,
Our interests by no means are their interests.
and it also reflects the change in the pop culture because a lot of these references come from video games that you and I just don't play.
Maybe that's one of the points.
That's probably one of them because I couldn't tell you a ding dong thing about any of the video games. Grand Theft Auto, Fallout, none of them. I don't know a thing about them. So all those references go right over my head.
Yeah.
In much the same way, a reference from Monty Python and the Holy Grail might go over somebody else's head because they've never seen the movie. If you pick certain movies or certain albums or certain TV shows that you and I used to watch when back in the day, we would get those references. We would understand those references. I'll
Mhm.
give you a microcosm of that, just a small example. Watching some of these reaction videos, there was somebody who was reacting to the original Superman with Christopher Reeves.
Mhm.
And it was the very first movie. He goes to change into Superman the first time, and he looks at a payphone mounted on a post. And he
Yeah.
just kind of looks at it and then runs
Yeah, that's funny.
to a revolving door. To
Right.
you and me, that's funny because
We have a run.
the meme back then was he changed in a phone booth.
That's
Well,
right.
even in the late 80s, early 90s, phone booths were just going away. So now, I mean, when was the last time you saw a phone booth?
Maybe sometime in the early 2000s, as I was driving by, abandoned,
Mm-hmm.
sitting in a corner at a crossroad, just sitting
Yeah.
there all lonesome like,
Yeah.
are
Well,
you lonesome tonight?
she didn't get the reference. She kind of, well, what the heck is he stopping to look at the telephone for? You know?
Mhm.
And it's like, oh my God, we have people who are getting close to 30 years old because she's like 26, 27,
Right, has no idea.
and has absolutely zero frame of reference.
That's right.
But then again, she's cackling her tail off to other TV shows and other music and what have you, or comedy routines that reference uh, current pop culture that I'm not privy to. And it's
Mhm.
just simply because I choose to be a cultural infidel. I don't want nothing to do with no video games because that's all I would ever do. And I know that. So uh, we got people talking about Rick French saw a phone booth in a corner in an old diner. Yeah, I mean, um, a few weeks ago outside Hard Juice Shop. Yeah, for some reason, I'm thinking it's not unusual to have for Hard Juice to have a phone booth.
He said it's not unusual.
It's
Dun,
not
dun, dun, dun,
unusual to be loved by anyone. Da, 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 da.
dun.
Now, the right people will get that. So, but I can't blame them for that because that's how language evolves.
Mhm.
If you would have talked to somebody in the 40s about anything rock and roll, they would have absolutely no clue what you were talking about. I
Mhm.
couldn't talk to my dad about Pink Floyd because he didn't listen to Pink Floyd.
Mhm.
But I could talk to him about Creedence Clearwater because he introduced me to Creedence Clearwater. But we had two different frames of reference there.
Yeah.
So, I can't get mad at it. The language does evolve and it evolves from outside forces. And we're seeing how it's happening that much faster.
Yeah. There was a big in the 80s, if I remember. We had two events, maybe more, but two that were pretty powerful that shifted things in the 80s, well, into the 90s, and that today, at least one of them has become a big thing. One of them was skater culture,
Mm-hmm.
like skateboards and whatnot.
Yeah.
That became a huge thing in the 80s to the point where every kid had a skateboard. I mean,
Yeah.
it became a thing. It wasn't just, a side thing and whatnot. It became a thing where with its own t-shirts and clotheslines and shoes and skateboard designs and stickers, and it just
Mm-hmm.
and it connected with music in terms of
Mm-hmm.
like heavy metal or
Yeah.
even like, other types of rock and roll. But so there was that. But then there was a simultaneous movement which came out of, I believe, New York, and Miami had its own variety of it, which here they called it bass, which was more a shoot off of a branch off of disco, but sort of like
Yeah.
uh,
I've heard it called house music as well. And then that kind of migrated into EDM.
yeah, that it became its own thing.
Yeah.
But in New York and then the rest of the country, it was
Mhm.
the rap.
Yeah.
And so those two things were happening, parallel to each other at the time. And I remember liking the rap to a degree,
Mhm.
um, especially Rum DMC. And I remember, well, looking back at it, I have fondness for Rum DMC as an example,
Mhm.
due to the fact that I guess it was played so much that you had no choice but to have fond memories of it. Like it was advertised to the kids of the time.
Sure.
Everything has been advertised, and then kids have no. So if you grew up
Yeah.
being advertised, I don't know, Potato Head, Mr. Potato Head,
It's been that way forever.
right? So we had those two things. The rap really took on a life of its own
Hmm.
to the point where today it is what it is. But when they came out with that gangster rap, there was one album that I liked, which was heavy metal, done by Ice T, I think it was, or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, which I thought was great because it's heavy metal plus rap, and there was
Mm-hmm.
a sort of fusion type thing going on, and that was cool. But then it just became nasty, and
Yeah.
it's calling women this, it's calling people that, and it was all negative, and
Mm-hmm.
it kind of coincided also a little bit with the dreary, gray, rainy days of grunge, and everything became like a drag, dude. Everything became like the
Well,
'80s were freaking awesome, and then everything went like freaking like depression, dude.
yeah, I was just thank you for saying that, because I was thinking that at about the same time. It's like they don't have a Great Depression. This generation doesn't have a Great Depression that our parents and grandparents went through. So they're creating their own.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, the music was dark, the movies were dark, the attitude was dark. And then a certain amount of optimism came back. I don't know how long lived it was, but now it's just kind of reached. I don't know that we've reached an equilibrium yet, because there is no one central driving force anymore.
Hmm. That's right.
Um, the in much like we were talking about, you know, the young people going their own way and taking what was once a side hustle and making it a career. Rick French, a woodworking shop in their basement. Exactly. I mean, just look at Etsy. But um, there are so many outlets and so many inlets. There isn't one driving force. With you and me, it was the radio, you know, and
Movies,
friends.
radio.
Yes, it
And
was movies, radio, TV.
mhm.
Those were the driving forces. If it wasn't on the radio, it basically might as well not exist.
And word of mouth.
Yes,
If a
yes,
friend of yours came up and said, "Dude, check out this cassette,"
yes,
and you take it home, and then that's how it would spread.
hmm
Because
yes,
many times those cassettes, at least in my era, and I'm sure many times those cassettes or albums, um, it wasn't played. A lot of the underground, you could call them, slightly below
hmm
the thing, would be shared in that fashion, and then they'd make it to the thing.
right.
It was, I think, it was all a marketing thing.
Oh, it's always marketing, because the people in that industry, whatever that industry may be, they have known, I mean, since the days of radio, anyway, at least since the days of radio. We're going back to the 20s here,
Mm-hmm.
that marketing to kids was the most effective, and specifically young girls. Young boys was successful as well, but young girls was particularly successful. They knew that the young girls didn't have money, but they also knew mom and dad did. And dad is more likely to get his little girl something she wants than he is to go out and buy something for himself. So, marketing towards kids, and especially young girls, has always been extremely effective. I'll give you an example. When MTV made that switch from playing all music videos all the time, they started incorporating TV shows geared towards young teens. A major sponsor of all those TV shows was Sprite. And for about a 15-year stretch, until MTV's ratings started to really plummet, for about a 15-year stretch, Sprite was the number one soft drink in America. It beat Coke, it beat Pepsi, it beat Dr. Pepper, all of those.
It
Sprite
works.
was number one because they advertised on those shows that the kids were watching.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah. And
Advertising does.
even though you may think it tastes the exact same as 7 Up, 7 Up's market share just absolutely plummeted because there was no advertising directed towards those young girls specifically, who were the primary watchers of MTV. So, yeah, that's always been the case. And it hasn't changed. We still today, most of the advertising when you're talking about the younger generation, it's pushed towards young girls because mom and dad will buy it for Susie.
And look at all the metrics that they have now. Because if,
Mhm.
like, we don't know behind the scenes, but everybody that's connected to the internet that visits different sites
Mhm.
and with the cookies, um, and all the information they pick up,
Mhm.
they can chart trends in people's habits and whatnot, and they can target advertise them.
Mhm.
So, in a way,
Well,
it's it's um it's all still going on, but it's more. It seems like it's way more efficient now because it's targeting the individual
right.
people.
Exactly. And it's easier to do now because there are companies that specialize in that kind of thing. There always have been, you've heard of Nielsen ratings and things like that as far as television is concerned.
I have.
But it is so much easier now for people to track what folks are watching because they have to log into a streaming service to watch it. So it's real easy to find out how popular, let's say, Game of Thrones is or was. It's real easy to do. It's a lot of information for like Mattel or Hasbro to try to keep track of, but there are other companies that'll gladly do it for them for a price. Look at the world of Lego. When you and I were growing up, when you went down and bought Lego, you bought a bucket or a box. If you were really cool, you had the little red toolbox full of Lego. And it was just the blocks. They might have a few instructions in them to show how to make some simple things, but it was up to you. You had 1,000 Legos. There you go. Run amok. Go ahead. And it usually devolved to the point to where I was seeing how tall I could make something without it falling over. Now you go to the store to buy Lego and you have complete Game of Thrones dioramas with instructions and special parts made just for that diorama and all of the pieces needed to make that little model of this imaginary Game of Thrones world, or The Hobbit, or Harry Potter and Hogwarts, and this, that, and the other. It's all sets with instructions perfectly designed to let you rebuild that. So we've kind of taken the imagination out of it, but then again, they're getting a better final product with that set. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, the company that makes Legos is selling 1,000 times more Lego products than they ever did when it was just left up to you and me to figure out, should this building's bottom be red or should it be blue? You know?
I every now and then, depending, it happens organically because it just fits. I swiped your saying back at the ranch.
Mm-hmm.
I've used it a few because I never in my
Mm-hmm.
life used it, but you've used it in context enough. Well, the first time was enough, but the point is you repeated it enough where it sat in my brain, and
My
it's
work
it's
here is done.
it's appropriate because in any given situation that it might be appropriate in, um, because it's a nice emphasis to get the person. So I had this. I saw this video and I felt like commenting and stuff, and I thought I had written something brilliant, and so I laid out this whole wasteland, teenage wasteland explanation. It was roughly it was a paragraph, and then
Mm-hmm.
at the end, in order to hook it back in a nice, neat way, I said,
Mm-hmm.
"Meanwhile, back at the ranch," and then I explained the cliffhanger,
Uh-huh.
and I looked at it and I said, "Man, that's sweet." And I clicked, and it may not have been at all a brilliant
Mm-hmm.
thing, but it made the whole structure perfect,
Mm-hmm.
and I sent it off and stuff.
That comes from the old movie trope or the old trope of the serials where you had three different storylines going on all at once. And, Timmy and Lassie, what's that girl? Timmy's fallen down a well? Meanwhile, back at the ranch,
That's right.
Mom has got a pie. She's putting it on a windowsill. She don't know why. She's just putting it on a windowsill. Mr. Drucker, what's going on? Now I've just mixed 15 different characters from
No, but I
52
see.
different things.
I
So
see
it
where
was
you're
that
pulling from.
it was that trope, you know.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, at the edge of town,
Yeah.
there's a car chase going on and all this other good stuff. So
You'd see it in comic books as well. I found it. It's a nice. I mean, it fits perfect. I've used it a few times. I just gave you one example. I forget what the argument that I was trying to make was in that one video, but it was a horrendous thing that I felt objection towards in the video. So I said, let me comment on it, and other people were commenting their own thing. And I just, it's. But see, that's how when people get together, or in the course of conversations across time, a word or a saying, or even a habit of a person to say something slightly different than everyone else, or off, a nudge, will become a something that someone grabs onto. And if you're not careful, I mean, why would you? But the point is, it will proliferate across a whole group of people, and then it becomes a thing with its own reference point and dictionary quotation.
That's where all of our slang comes from. Somebody decided to say it, and it kind of caught on with a few people, and next thing you know, it's going crazy. And Americans are excellent at coming up with words like that. We're real good at it.
They're shortcuts.
Yeah.
That convey well, number one, like you said, literally an actual thing that you would see in serials, but it also conveys a whole series of other things, instead of wording out this whole long thing. And then if I think back, I will now return to what I was saying before. Instead of saying all that, you just round it off with meanwhile back at the ranch, and it's perfect. And it also denotes well, it's a very Americana thing to say, even without me have heard it. I understood it right away, but the point is, I never used it. It was not something that, but once I heard it, I said, oh, well, and I found the place for it. I said, oh, well, this is perfect. And this is quite, and so I basically swiped it. It's kind of like music. So, music, just as a reference thing, music is a lot like that, because it is a language. And what you find is, when you're studying, like, let's say the guitar, or this or that, like when I first started, I started realizing, well, wait a second, this is the same chord structure that this other band uses. Holy crap. And you start seeing like similar, and even words, like a lot of people pay homage. I think it's homage. I've never quite. A lot of people pay homage to lyrics in other songs by incorporating them into their own songs, which becomes famous in their own right, or even reference points from culture. And so it's a lot like that,
Yeah. But that's how it also that's also how it propagates. But it also depends. I mean, oh man, there are just so many references that it's almost impossible to come up with good examples of stuff that is still with us today and stuff that is gone. I mean, we've talked about a few of them before. Yeah, shoot from the hip.
Isn't that a Western reference?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an old Western reference. Now, as in fact, Steve asked, how many car chases do you remember from the old Westerns? And I said the old serials. I didn't necessarily mean the Westerns. I didn't watch Western serials. I was that guy who thought that like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, I thought they were funny. And I loved watching them because of the campiness involved. The rocket ship, the rocket ships always took off in a circle, and you could see they put little smoke pyrotechnics in the exhaust pipe, but they didn't figure on how physics actually worked, because the smoke came out about a half inch and then went straight up. So there was no thrust coming out of these rockets. It was
Yeah.
just smoke leaking out of the exhaust. And
Yeah.
then you could sometimes even see the wires where suddenly it lifted up and made a circle like that. And then it flew away.
Yeah.
You know, I thought that kind of thing was funny. It was campy and I enjoyed the heck out of it. And there were car chases aplenty in those old serials. So, oh my gosh. But I'm talking about, I'm watching the old stuff from the 30s, 40s, and early 50s.
Yeah, just an aside before you get to the next. I sense that you're gonna read off some comments. I want to say one bit before I forget. The Muppets show during the 80s. I remember. I used to watch it.
Oh
but
yeah.
I remember waiting always for two things.
Mm-hmm.
One, the two dudes in the balcony.
Statler and Waldorf, my heroes.
I was like, why can't they show them more? I remember as a kid, I was like, why don't they show them more? What's going on? And remembering watching the music that they play, I'd be like, oh crap. Like, and I'd wait, like I'd play until the Muppets would show up again, and then I'd go back. But anytime there was a performance, I could give a crap about the performance. As a kid, I wanted to see the Muppets. The other one was I think it was they had Pigs in Space.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved
Pigs in Space. Yep.
Those were the two things that I would just sit there and wait and hope that they'd show up. Yeah, those good memories.
Well, I don't want to break your heart, but my oldest daughter was an absolute fanatic for the Muppets. And we would sit there with her when she heard that ITC thing, the logo, dum da 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 dum da 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 da. She would come running out of whatever room of the house she was in. The Muppet Show was on. Muppet Show, and then just dive from the middle of the room onto the sofa. So we watched the Muppet Show with her.
Incredible.
I would encourage you to go back and watch some of the music that they did, though, because there were some excellent performances. And it wasn't always comedy. I think one of my favorites was Linda Ronstadt sang Blue Bayou on the Muppet Show. And it's a real moody song. It's, a ballad, and she's missing her baby and everything else. I was in love with Linda Ronstadt anyway. But about 20 Muppet frogs in there keeping ribbit, keeping rhythm with it.
That's
She'd
right.
be, down on Blue Bayou, ribbit. It was funny, but it's flipping good. There was some great it was some great performances on that show. But with Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem as the backing band. Yes. So yeah, and I'm a young adult. I mean, I'm in my 20s watching this with my daughter, and yeah, it was great. So don't feel like the Lone Ranger. It took her to see the Muppet movie when it came out.
I think I remember that.
And that was a fun movie. I mean, yeah, it was directed towards kids. You have to keep that in mind when you watch it. But some of the stuff that they did to make that movie, it's friggin' fascinating. I mean, when Fozzie Bear is driving down the car and you're seeing an exterior shot of this old Studebaker driving down the road with a Muppet Bear driving it, it's like, holy hell, how did they do that?
Just because it fits in this, my dad my dad would take me as a little kid to the movies a lot. Mm-hmm. And I find it interesting looking back, considering the era now. And we would go see. There was no rating system for my dad not to take me to the movie. I mean, we could be sitting and watching one of those exploitation movies because he wanted to see it, and I'd sit there and I'd be seeing like women dancing, like topless and stuff. And I'm a little kid, and all he'd say, close your eyes, cover your eyes. And I'd go like this, and then I'd do one of these.
He knew you were watching.
and it could be horror movies, like shoot 'em up violent, like, anything. And I just sit there and watch the movie. Didn't affect me one bit.
Mm-hmm. I've made it no secret how much of a prude my mother was. She would not let me go see a R-rated movie at all. Not while you're living in my house, you're not. So the first R-rated movie I went to go see, I was married and had a child because mom was that bad. I wanted to go see the when the Who rock opera Tommy came out. It's rated R. You're not going. Oh, come on, mom! It's music. It's this. It's it. I don't care. You're not going.
So, so one
You
time,
know.
another bit like that. There was this very like lyrically cussy type album
Mm-hmm.
that I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and my mom had no idea either way. Like it's like whatever, and says, "Mom, I want the record." And she said, "Okay, I'm gonna get you the." And it was like $10, right? And $10 was $10 back then. But she said,
Mm-hmm.
"Okay." She wanted to, please her son and get her the gift, get him the gift. And so we drove to here in Sweetwater. We drove to the record shop. There's a little record shop in Sweetwater. When you walk in, it was tiny. You just had two rows, one row against the wall,
Mm-hmm.
plus looking up against the up the wall you had all the records, so you'd see Kiss up there,
Mm-hmm.
and you see all the records hung there, and in the center they had a little thing, and then they had their what you call the desk where they
The register and all that. Yeah.
register and all that, and then they had here and there other little things, and so I went in, and this was about the time when they passed the stamp on
Oh,
music,
the lyrics label. Yeah.
and everybody was keen on that at the time,
Mm-hmm.
like all the adults and stuff. My mom and dad, for that matter, they weren't to them. They left their country due to everything being turned into the
A
situation.
war zone, basically. Yeah.
So they left that. So you think an album is something of shock to, they're not thinking in terms, um you know what I'm saying? So like, this is
Yeah.
America, and people
Mm-hmm.
are worried about record. They're not thinking in that terms. But meanwhile, back at the ranch in America, people are concerned about these things. But so she takes me, walk through, and so he wants a record, and I tell the guy the record, and he pulls out the record. He says, "There's two versions in front of my mom. There's two versions. This one is with all the bad lyrics removed from the song, and this one is for kids over 18." And he hands me the one where it's all restricted,
Mm-hmm.
and I basically just I had a hissy fit. I was like, "Come on, no, mom, no!" And when he made her aware of it,
Then she said something. Yeah.
then she said, "Oh, this is the correct thing, not the other one with the bad words." And she said, "No, son, get this one." I was like, "Mom, please, no, no." And the guy was, and I looked at the guy as a little kid.
You son of a bitch.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh man. Rick French. The movie Tommy was my first date with my now wife, 1975. Yeah, I was 14, and mom just said, "No, it's rated R. You're not going." And the even though we were in the San Francisco Bay Area, the town was small enough that there were only like two theaters right within reasonable distance of our house. So if I said I was going to the other movie, she'd have known I was full of it. So I just didn't go. So
Well, we would
I
sneak in.
I couldn't get away with stuff like that, you know.
Me and my friends, we would purchase. Well, me and a couple of friends, we would purchase tickets for the G or for the PG, whatever, and we'd watch that.
Uh-huh.
But then we'd say, "Okay, you go and get popcorn, and we're gonna go to the bathroom, and this and that." And remember, this was all small theaters and stuff. So we could have easily gotten busted. And who knows if they just said, "Oh, I'll let these kids," who knows
Yeah.
what the story was? Because it's not like we were like,
They knew what was going on.
yeah, we're not super detectives and stuff. And we
Uh,
sneak into the adult one as well. So we did stuff like that.
yeah. Well, you got to remember that this was back in 75, and they were single screen theaters. They weren't the, 15 screen space arcs that they have out now. These were
Yeah.
single screen theaters, and it was a big, huge open theater with a ginormous screen. You weren't in a little corridor.
We are
Um,
ours. No, actually, we had three
mhm,
in the theater here in Sweetwater. I think it was three. It was either two or three. I think it was three.
mhm,
Um, that they'd play simultaneously. So we had
mhm.
the three, which was great for us.
Yeah.
Walking
Well,
distance.
we still had drive-ins at the time, and we did go to the drive-in, and there were a few single-screen drive-ins, but a lot of drive-ins had 3, 4 screens. And there it was easy to get lost in the shuffle and go see what you wanted to see because, as okay, we're going to go see this movie here, and we'd end up at the Bruce Lee triple feature. Well, sorry, Mom, it just went longer than we thought it was, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that was still, it wasn't within our town. And that was a couple years, that was later after I got my driver's license. Then I started going to the drive-ins and what have you. But when it was walk-in theaters, number one, Mom had to take you and drop you off. So she knew what was playing. And the other theaters were so far apart from one or the other, I would have gone. And plus, my luck. You know what I say about my luck.
Yeah.
If there was a way I could get caught, I would. That's why I have to be, pretty much honest. Because half the time I can't remember what, if I try to fib about something, I can't remember what I said. So I get caught immediately. So I don't even bother,
It's funny how that works. I mean, to be honest with you, they were, well, I've told you before, they were a little bit more lenient, and so, or not, it's weird.
Well,
Some of the things that would tick off regular parents, to them was like the standard was not, and plus I also was devious because I would hide my report cards. They had no idea when I mean, I did a bunch of stuff. Just a bunch of stuff. So basically, but they wouldn't have gotten pissed off with some of the regular stuff that they expected you to do good and not be like this little heathen throughout the town of Sweetwater. And they couldn't imagine that you would. I mean, I guess they would, but I don't even know how to explain it other than, they were a little bit more lenient in the things that some people might think that,
you also have to consider it was about 15 years after I was growing up. So some of the mores had changed. Some of the, I won't say the morality had changed, but some of the norms had shifted quite a bit. Because, I mean, growing up in the turbulent 60s when there were riots on every street corner, I mean, I've told you this probably 100 times before. I can remember being up on my knees over the back of the couch looking out the front window at a demonstration going by our house, and my mother grabbing me by the back of my shirt and yanking me backwards off of the couch. She's afraid somebody's going to throw a brick through the window at me or something like that. So growing up during that time, by the time you came along and were watching this stuff and doing these things, a lot of them there was a major shift in the pop culture, and stuff that was absolutely unacceptable when I was a kid were more or less normal.
Well, the kids didn't like in your era. Well, so by the time I'm starting to look around, the kids that are older, like I've mentioned before, are dressed with leather, but it's a different type of leather, not like, I guess, the greaser type people. It was more like the rock and roll hair metal type people.
Right. And where me growing up, leather was seen as some sort of a rebellious person, and not in a, oh, he's a rebel kind of a way. Nothing like that. These were, undesirable folks you didn't want to be associated with. That's the way it was portrayed. Whether they were actually that way or not is anybody's guess. But that's the way it was portrayed. And it was the same with long hair. If you had hair that touched your collar, you had better be female. That loosened up. And, I mean, heck, even my dad had hair that touched his collar. Whereas 5 years before, we both had crew cuts or flat tops.
Well, my old man, when because I did ask him one time, and I asked him, Dad, do you remember the hippies in the 60s? and he said, "Oh yeah, those were a bunch of dirty people sitting out in front of the park that didn't take showers." That's all he. That's that. His quote. He basically encompassed his definition by saying, "Oh yeah, those were those dirty people that used to sit by the park," you know. And
And
so, go ahead.
that's
Yeah.
the way they were portrayed in the popular culture. I remember the Red Skelton show. Red Skelton would come out and he'd do a monologue, and he had a couple of characters he would do. One of them was Gertrude and Heathcliff. They were two seagulls. And he was the king of the one-liners with Gertrude and Heathcliff. And he'd tuck his hands underneath his armpits, and he'd flap his elbows like he had wings or something. And it was a one-liner joke between Gertrude and Heathcliff. And he says, "What weighs 2,000 pounds and stinks?" And Heathcliff says, "I don't know." Gertrude says, "A hippopotamus."
Hmm.
That was
Simple.
that was in the pop culture. Hippies
Right.
were dirty people that stunk.
Yeah.
And that, just growing up around San Francisco, hippie Mecca, that just wasn't the case. I mean, I'm sure some of them didn't shower, but most of them did. They were
Well,
just people that didn't want to be put into a box.
yeah, but to people like my old man, and not my mom was a little bit more modern, but my dad, you can easily, I've said it before, but you could take him and place him in 1898,
Mm-hmm.
and he would have zero problem. He'd be completely like, yeah, this is completely normal.
See, with me, it's the other way around. My dad was more modern, and my mom would have been fine in Victorian times.
That's incredible. It just, it's like, that's how I mean, my grandfather forget, that's an interesting, we have touched on it before, but we're shy of, not that it's a long time now, but
Mhm.
in terms of just the person that was born prior to us, our parents and
Mhm.
grandparents, were people that were um really from another time.
Oh yeah.
um we lived as little kids, respectively, in environments with families that were literally from far removed from what the status quo is now.
Oh yeah.
Far removed, in my mind, far removed.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Big time. Well,
Yeah.
because a lot of them did without. They sacrificed. I mean, my parents were born during World War II, and their parents were born before the Depression. So they lived through all of this stuff.
Yeah.
We haven't had anything like that. We've had bad times. We've had a couple of wars. We've had some tragedies, both natural and man made, but we've never lived through anything like they lived through. And our kids, even less so. And their kids, even less so. I'm at the age where I could have grandkids, great grandkids. Well, 5 of my 7 grands are of childbearing age. They're all in their 20s. So the fact that I'm not a great grandparent kind of surprised me and relieves me at the same time. But then again, but they haven't had anything like that in their lives. And I'm glad that they haven't had anything in their like that in their lives. But then again, they don't have any kind of a frame of reference. They've never had to do without. I don't know about you growing up, but my grandmother's favorite thing, whenever I said I wanted something, she would say, "Well, honey, you're going to have to save up for it." And that was just the way you did. You saved up for it. Now, I now understand, as I grew up a little older, I also understand that a lot of times they were getting ideas for birthday gifts and Christmas gifts and things like that. "Well, honey, you're going to have to save up for it. And maybe it'd be under the Christmas tree, or maybe I'd get it for my birthday."
Yeah.
But the
No, no.
concept of saving up part of your allowance or your paycheck or something like that to purchase it for cash is just a foreign concept to too many people these days.
Well, no, in contrast to that, I was the firstborn in the United States,
Mhm.
and I had my 4 grandparents. I had my all at the same time. Me growing up, I had my 2 parents, my 4 grandparents, and 2 of my great grandparents.
Uh-huh.
And then the exile community, the Cuban exile community, in support of that, with aunts and uncles and
Right.
so on and so forth. And so it was a huge, thing. And I think that I was, due to that, plus being the first one born here, I think that I was treated with extra special. You would think that one would be, I don't know that I would self qualify myself as spoiled. I was spoiled, but I don't know that I maybe I did, but I don't think so. I don't feel like I'm a spoiled. I think that I'm a solitary, independent person. I don't know that it affected me, because you know how you say if you get everything so
Mhm.
gratuitously, you don't learn the. But I went on my own to get my job, because I so chose. I've always been. I think the key, and you hear me harp on
Gosh.
it a lot, especially with Greg. We always go back and forth on things. I think that this idea of freedom in the context of whatever that might mean to other people, but to me, in terms of like this Americana thing, this
Uh-huh.
very uh, I think that was basically the overarching thing. But I was spoiled in a sense, but it's not like we had a lot, but we didn't have.
No,
No,
but
we were always fed.
I was getting ready to say you always had a roof over your head.
Yeah, we were always fed.
You never had to worry about where your next meal was coming from.
That's right.
And I was the same way. And generally speaking, if we wanted to do something, we could. Um, Back to the fast food thing for just a brief second. When I was a kid growing up, going out to dinner was a treat, and fast food was a big time treat because mom and dad weren't, I mean, they liked their hamburgers, but they didn't like the McDonald's and the Burger King. They liked the local joints because that's
Right.
what they were used to
The good stuff.
growing up. Yeah. I mean, here in Medford, they had Jack's Drive In, and they had another place called Cubby's, which was the stereotypical 50s drive up hamburger joint. It was a round building that had a whole bunch of drive up menus where you pulled up, you read the menu, you pushed the button, and the car hop came out on roller skates, took your order, brought your food out on a tray, and hung it on your car window. And you just sat there and ate it in your car listening to the radio. And so that's the kind of thing that they were used to. It wasn't corporate burgers with something decided back in Baltimore. It was this little local joint. Well, McDonald's was excellent at marketing towards kids. So guess where my brother and I always wanted to go? So
McDonald's.
going to McDonald's was like maybe 3 times a year, but we always had a roof over our head and we always had food. Mom cooked, everybody ate at dinner time. And if you didn't, you just went hungry. You know, if you didn't like what was being served for dinner, you were SOL.
Well, that part, yes, because there
So,
was no other options.
mhm,
Mom cooked, and that's what you were having. So in that
yeah,
scenario, something that, it might be just me, but you tell me. Something
okay,
that's very, um, everybody's different, from everybody's point of view, is it's different, but something that's
sure.
very much in my memory, and a very, that it made me, it's a very Americana thing, um, is long distance driving,
Mhm,
and those pit stops along highways
mhm,
in the middle of nowhere, with where you fill up your gas and your
mhm,
just pit stops along the way. There's something about my, when we go off on family trips and stuff and just head out,
mhm,
there's something just that you can just, grab onto, and sort
mhm.
of rescue from the past.
Yeah,
Something about driving far and there being a little pit stop with your, gas station stuff in the middle of nowhere and stuff. There's something so, and then you're heading in a dust. That concept of the travel or the journey,
uh-huh.
man, that's something,
And
and
it's
it's
not
hard.
the same. I'm with you. It's not the same anymore because now all the pit stops and the rest stops are all the same. If it's not a truck stop, it's something else that's corporate, and there's a
Yeah.
McDonald's, a Burger King, maybe a Taco Bell, and a KFC.
Yeah. You
And
left
those are
home
your
to get
choices.
yeah, you're leaving home to get to home. It's something so similar to where
Yes.
you're coming. Yeah.
Now, I can see where that's appealing to any number of people, because having traveled a little bit in Europe, yes, we ate in Burger King in Paris. We did it on purpose because no matter where you go, you know what you're going to get there. It's not a mystery, and you're not trying to decipher. You know, if you can say un in French, which is one, you can get a Whopper combo.
Uh,
You know, and that's it. You
what
know,
would you like, sir?
but
Uh,
but with the interstate system that we have now, traveling long distance it's just not the same as it used to be. When you were on 2-lane highway that went through every town along the route,
that's
and
right.
every gas station was a different company. Sure, there was Shell and there was Chevron, and at the time Mobil, now it's Exxon.
Yeah.
um
66. What was it?
Phillips 66.
Phillips.
Yeah. And you had Atlantic Richfield, which became Arco.
You know what?
And huh?
No. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
And yeah,
My
but all
mind.
the diners were different. All of the restaurant choices were different. And so if you had that one favorite spot in Willows, California, coming up Highway 99, that's where you aimed for that place. And yeah, you'd have to slow down to 25 miles an hour because you're going through the middle of town, and red light, and oh man, it must be onion harvest season because look at all the tractors towing trailers full of onions and all this other crap. But it was traveling was a much slower pace, not necessarily because we wanted it to be, just by necessity. But everything was different from town to town to town. And you would see, this restaurant, there's a clown in the window waving. Come on, keep yelling, kid, they'll stop, that kind of thing. Or, oh, wow, look, they've got a dragon in their window. And dad, look, the world's largest ball of rubber bands, let's stop, let's go see it. That kind of thing.
Dude, there's some crazy stuff across the map.
God,
Or back
yeah.
then. There's so in Gatlinburg, which you've been, right, to Gatlinburg?
Yes, it's been years, but Linda and I, we went to Gatlinburg in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Yeah.
I loved it, but it's funny because when we went to Gatlinburg, there's so many stories, but when we went to Gatlinburg, because again, my parents, it's like, the disassociating from what something is and the level of risk or danger or this or that would fluctuate, or what's acceptable or not, because it's freedom, man. That's it. The point here is freedom, and really that was ingrained in me. It just was to an extreme level, and so we went to, but there's some things that they might have thought twice about. So we went to Gatlinburg, and like there's this haunted little thing, right? There's all these little places you can go in. I said, "Oh, Dad, I want to go to the haunted. I want to go to the haunted." And he's like, "Okay, here's some money. Go get your ticket, and we'll wait out here." "Oh no, but I want you guys to come." "No, we're not going in that. We'll wait for you here." And I'm like, "Well, now do I really want to go?"
Yeah.
I
wanted by yourself.
I wanted like a little family haunting thing, but not. And so, but I went, and dude, it was just me and a couple of other children, like 2 or 3. They sat you in a room. This is all what the attraction was. They sat you in a room with benches, like park benches inside this room. It looked like one of those like panic rooms where there's nothing, and there's no doors, and when they sit you in the room. And this is the whole thing. And the lights turn off. And when the lights come on, right in front of you is a Chainsaw Massacre guy with an actual chainsaw. And he freaking rips it and turns it on. And the volume of the chainsaw, Mark, is literally the volume of a chainsaw inside a little room, and the lights start flashing, and he's screaming, and I'm a little kid like this. Dude, I walked out. Have you ever walked out after being scared and like you can't quite put your feet right on the? I was like shaking, dude. And my dad's standing out there, and he says, "Well, did you like it, son?" So sometimes it's good that your parents check, because I don't know that I would allow my kid to do such a thing, dude.
Well, I'm going to give you valuable style points for saying you walked out of there. Because I would have been a brown stripe.
Yeah.
Running.
Dude, but he was like, imagine a room no bigger than like a 12 by 12.
Mark, why are you running? Because I cannot fly, you know.
Dude, and they had those strobe lights too. It was
Yeah.
insane. So this is what an American, like, it was probably like a couple of guys that said, you know, we should start a business. We live here in Gatlinburg. Let's scare people for a living. Yeah. And so that's how they would make their money. It's insane, dude.
It worked. They got yours.
They got ours. Yeah. Holy smokes.
Greg says, our cross-country trips had a cooler in the back that had breakfast, lunch, and supper in it that we would stop at a roadside rest area to eat. I've seen it many, many times.
Yeah.
Many times. It's almost a meme. When we were stationed in Germany, the Turks who immigrated to Germany, it didn't matter where they went, the whole family went. I mean, if one was going just down to the gas station to fill up the car, the whole family got dressed and they went. You may only be going down the block and coming right back, but the whole family went. And if they were going from town to town, they did the same thing, Greg, but they did it slightly different. They would just pull off to the side on the Autobahn, and they'd build a fire, and they'd have the tripod with the grill, and they're out there cooking on the side of the highway.
They're doing it up.
And I mean, everything but musical instruments way off the side of the road, off of the pavement. But I mean, it was almost like a campsite.
Nomadic travel across the...
And I mean, there might be 8, 10, 12 people there just off the side of the road making lunch. And, you know, 4-way flashers on the car so that they didn't get rear-ended or what have you. Yeah. Nobody paid him any attention. But that was so... I know it was foreign, but that whole concept was so foreign to me. It was just like, holy cow, look at what's going on. You know?
Crazy, dude.
Yeah.
There's so many different... That reminds me, this is a side note, just a quick side note. There's a video of a guy, American guy, he travels across the world. There's a few of those. And in the one episode that I saw, he said, I am going to the most isolated place in Indonesia, roughly thereabouts or whatever. And he booked a flight, and he literally landed, drove out to the middle of nowhere. He's in the middle of nowhere in this village with Indonesian people, with like some temples and whatnot. And he met up with a guy that was going to be his tour guide there, so he could speak the language and this and that. And he went to a wet marketplace, you know, to a marketplace where they have literally like all sorts of things for sale, food wise and whatnot. And he came across rats sitting piled up, literally for sale. Mm-hmm. And he's like, wow, look, there's... And this lady was looking at the rats like you would look at some T-shirts at your local Walmart. And you're thinking, should I have the blue one? And, you know, and she's looking at it like quite... And so he buys 2 of them for her. Mm-hmm. And she invites him to her house to eat. And they go to her house and they show how they prepare it. And she boils it, she skins it, removes all of this and that, and cooks it. A rat, dude. Mm-hmm. And then she puts it in a little bowl and she brings the rice and all this and that. And she wants me to try some. And in the camera, he tries it, dude. And he's like, oh, it tastes like chicken. I'm like, dude. I mean, in a pinch, if you're in trouble, what are you going to do? But in order to put that down, in order to get that down, the concept is so against completely everything. I mean, how would you look at? I mean, you need to survive, but
I mean, yeah, I can see several different ways from seven different angles. Number one, I'm with you.
yeah,
I mean,
I
my
hope.
initial response is, "Eeh." But then again, then the logic part of my head kicks in and says, well, what's the matter with it? She's not, she didn't dig it out of a dumpster. She cleaned it. She cooked it. It's prepared correctly. What harm could it do?
Yeah, but ugh,
Again, that's the logic
that's
part of
yeah,
me.
that's the yeah.
Um, I mean, I'd try it. I don't want to insult the person who
Well,
was
then they might
nice enough
the tribe
to.
might come out and grab you and put you on a stake
Yeah, what,
and put
you
you in a
wouldn't
cooker.
eat the rat?
You have
You know,
insulted the chief.
yeah, exactly. You might as well just have slapped him and kicked his dog, you know. So part of me says, well, you don't want to be disrespectful, but the other part of me is screaming inside, that's a rat, put it down, you
It's
know.
not like look, it's not like coming to America and being offered a hot towel before your dinner. Okay, there's a huge gulf difference between sir, would you like, let's say you come from another country and they offer you a hot. There's no scenario that I would imagine, maybe there is, in which someone from another country would say, oh, how these people are so weird. A hot towel. This is, but flip that around to a freaking rat on a freaking Barbie. I don't know.
Yeah, Steve says if you're hungry enough, even roast leg of Eloy would work. Yeah, but I don't know that I've ever been that hungry.
See, that's where the what is it? The something of the lambs.
Silence of the Lambs.
That's where the Steve Silence of the Lambs side. Like I can see Steve now with like a thing of wine and saying, you know what, we had to do it. We had to do it.
Yeah, Rick French says back in the 60s, we ate fried salamanders as part of a Boy Scout merit badge.
Oh
Had to
boy.
catch them first, though. Okay, it was a survival merit badge. Okay. Well, who was your scoutmaster? Bear Grylls? I mean, you know, come on, man.
That's crazy, dude.
I mean, you know, I've never, and talk about your king of the first world problems. I'm that way with sushi. I have never been so hungry that I couldn't wait for somebody to go ahead and fry the fish. It's like,
Oh
yeah, you
really?
know, if it's the choice between raw fish and cooked fish, I can wait. I can wait. Go ahead and cook it up.
But you've never tried. Okay, so
Oh,
I
I've
know.
tried it. I just don't like it.
Oh, so you tried? You've not tried salmon, raw salmon?
Yes.
Oh my god! So and you don't like
Yes.
it,
Yeah, I don't like the texture.
but you're not disgusted necessarily
No,
by
no,
it.
no. I just don't prefer it. I mean, I've tried it.
Well,
When
if they go ahead, go ahead.
when we were stationed over in Hawaii, there's a Hawaiian. Um, it's a food, but it's kind of hard to say. It's just a food. It's called poke, poke.
Does
And
it move while you're eating it? Hey, don't do
no,
that. Don't do that.
no. It's basically different types of raw fish with different seasonings and spices.
Okay.
So you might have, but it's more than just that. You might have uh, little diced pieces of marlin with onion and a little bit of soy sauce, and then you might have mahi mahi with some other type of sauce and some ginger. Just various different types of fish with various different sauces, but it's more than that. Like I had smoked octopus, and that's considered a poke. But
Okay.
again, it was cooked. You
Right.
have to cook octopus, otherwise it's so tough it's you can't eat it.
It's
But anyway,
rubber.
yes, it is. It's yeah. Even rubber goes, damn, but
Yeah.
it's bad. I just didn't like the texture of it. The flavor was fine. I mean, it's fish. I
Yeah.
just couldn't get around the texture of it. It something there was wrong. So what I did was I teased Linda about it for a couple of years while we were over there. She was in Louisiana on a field exercise, and I'm in Hawaii. I got some, threw it in the wok, and stir fried it up, and it was fantastic stuff. But
That's hilarious.
but oh yeah. Greg says rat, snake, horse, dog, skunk. It's all protein. Okay, well, now I know where I'm not going for barbecue.
Yeah, that's not a very welcoming sentence there.
Now, snake, I would give it a try. I've never had it, but I know several people who have, and they say, yeah, it's good.
Dude,
I've just have never had an occasion to try it, so I'd give it a shot. I've heard from several people that horse is not particularly good either. It's so lean that there's no succulence to it.
you know,
I don't
now
know.
oh, so I know that we're used to our I don't know that. Okay, I'm going to ask you the question like this. And
Okay.
excuse if it's not excuse you because you're not going to be necessarily either way offended either way. But to anybody that sees this in the future, because I'm asking from a place of ignorance, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and biased, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
There are extreme examples of foods in America
Mm-hmm.
that would be off-putting, that fall on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
But is there anything out there in
Mm-hmm.
other places um, that they would come here and have the same reaction as I would towards something like rat? Or I know some people do eat horse, but those are extremes. Our normal cuisine, I think, is palatable to
Well,
so very broadly from the perspective of outsiders. Am I wrong? Well, unless you're
it
Indian.
it is for our culture. Yes, there's certain religions over in um, there's certain Asian religions where they don't eat beef, and
Yeah.
or other meats. But you talk about your king of the first world problems here. Our quote unquote cuisine, which is a mixture of cuisines from all over the world that have
Yeah.
come here as wave after wave of immigrants settled here.
Yeah.
But if you look at some of the cultures who have things that are off-putting to us, the main reason they have those things is because there was a time when that's all they had. And now it's ingrained in their culture. I mean, there is a reason why certain Asian cultures eat chicken feet because
Yeah.
you didn't throw anything away, and that may be the only protein you get today. There are cultures all over the world that eat insects. We have never had to resort to that as a way of sustenance.
Yeah.
Some people here do eat insects, but they're in the minority. You know, we don't go down to Jiminy Crickets and have a cicada burger.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are stands in some countries in Asia and Africa where they do. I mean, I
But
know in South America they eat guinea pig,
yeah,
and you know,
there's something. But okay, so again,
so
I know it's biased. Well, go
but
ahead. Go
but
ahead.
I can't think of anything here that would be massively on off-putting
Right.
to somebody else who didn't have a spiritual restriction on no pork or no beef or no meats of any types, you know.
Again, you're right. We're a mismatch of wave after wave of foods that have been brought in and have incorporated itself into like the larger national dietary thing. So, but like if you thought of American dish from my point of view, what I think of American dishes, I for some reason I it's always burger or steak.
Mhm.
It could be ground beef type chili type thing. It could be those things. It could be chicken, like fried chicken, right?
Mhm.
Um and then you have your potatoes, you have your sort of like lettuces, and it
Mhm.
could be a coleslaw slash whatever.
Sure.
You have I mean, you can even have chicken sort of like patties
Mhm.
where they bread them up, and so you have this world
Mhm.
of that, and you have some vegetables and beans and whatnot, but you have sort of like that world, and there's ribs and whatnot, and this and that.
Mhm.
So you have this sort of like world of stuff. None of
Sure.
that seems to me, but again, from bias, because you
Mhm.
don't. you don't know what you don't know, and you don't
Sure.
proceed from another vantage
Sure.
point. To me, all that sounds pretty freaking like
Yeah,
non-aggressively
it's pretty
shocking.
normal. Yeah.
Whereas a rat, dude, or a freaking, I don't know,
Well,
like skunk. Hey, everybody, let's. I mean, I know it's
there.
all that they have, but like,
Yeah, but some of that just becomes part of the tradition. Like there's a lot of places all over this country, not just down south, that still eat a lot of squirrel because, I mean, I've had squirrel stew and it's damn good, but it's just what was there. So that's what they had. I mean, same thing with rabbit and things of that nature.
was Rocky Raccoon a squirrel?
Oh no, Rocky the flying
Beaver.
squirrel. Rocky was a
Rocky
squirrel. Yeah.
Rocky
You know,
Raccoon is actually a Beatles song.
Beatles. Yeah. You confused Hey Rocky with Rocky
Yeah.
Raccoon.
Well, Bullwinkle would have been on the plate.
Bullwinkle and Rocky both. I mean, that's a Canadian buffet right there. So I mean,
Pokey Pig.
I could see Greg growing up watching Bullwinkle and Rocky and Dad coming in. How many times have I told you not to play with your food? But now I want to get him going. Let's see. But yeah, I mean, there is a thing, and I don't remember what part of Africa it's from. I really don't remember where it's from. It's called kunga cake. And what it is what it looks like is like, when you open up a package of ramen noodles and you have that cake of ramen noodles that you drop into the boiling water to cook them, it looks like that. But if you look at it really closely, what they do is they go out with humongous nets and they collect up all of these flying gnats and midges and things, not mosquitoes. Well, there may be the odd one in there.
Yeah.
And they bring them back. And I mean, there are just trillions of these things. They bring them back and they compress them into a cake, and it's sold as a treat. And you eat kunga cake. I mean, it's dried, so it's not like they're moving around or anything like that.
Well, yeah, I know,
But
but
it's
that's
compressed and more or less cooked during the compressing thing. But
yeah,
but who am I to say that it's not something
for
for
you.
me? But who am I to say that no, you're wrong. You shouldn't eat that.
Oh, no, I'm not
You
going
know.
in that direction.
No, I know you weren't. I'm just saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I guess it speaks to our particular, it's just the
Yeah.
way one, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there are extremes. We do have extremes.
Oh,
We have
sure, we do.
like the bull testicles that some of these crazy
Oh,
people
yeah.
eat.
Well, no, even even more than that, they have big parties for it. Virginia City, Nevada, once a year, they have what they call the Great Virginia City Testicle Festival, where it is a competition like barbecue competition or something where you have a rib cook off or a brisket cook off or what have you. They have the testicle festival and they say, come on up and have a ball. So it's a
That's
catchy
joke.
slogan, but it brings people from all over the place.
I don't like the idea. I am a little bit, to separate, like, I know it's after the fact, but to separate a male of any of the species from their nuts
Mm-hmm.
goes against something very deep within me that I cannot. Sure, I'll chew on their leg and rib cage
Yeah,
after
but
it's
there are
been
certain
barbecued.
things that I don't want. Yeah, exactly. I'm a bit squeamish as far as that's concerned. And I'll be honest, I don't like many of the organ foods. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
like kidney. I don't like liver.
Hmm.
Heart, I don't believe I've had beef heart. Now, chicken hearts and chicken gizzards, I'll eat the heck out of them. In fact, we've
Yeah.
talked about this before. Whenever Mom cooked liver for her and Dad, she always fried up my brother and I a big old mess of chicken gizzards, and we'd tear them suckers up. But I'm kind of with Dan here. I draw the line at testicles before day 5 of no food. Yeah, when I'm getting that low on the cow to where that's all I got left, and there's not another cow in sight, and I can't go fishing.
Yeah, well, look, obviously,
Oh God,
right?
my
I
nose
think he's
itches.
on to the right thing because there is a point, a line from which one crosses into the
Oh
next
sure.
area of hunger, in which all sorts of things start to become.
Mm-hmm.
Remember those old? Last thing I'll say. Remember those? Unless we have some other, I think that we're rounding. Um, but do you remember those old Looney Tune cartoons? And it was, I guess, it was stuff that was produced slightly after the Great Depression or during that era, where you'd see in some of the cartoons where the guy's so hungry he pulls off a shoe and he starts eating the
The
leather.
shoe, yeah. And Charlie Chaplin in that old silent movie, The Gold Rush, where he boils his shoe and he takes it apart and everything, and he takes the shoelaces and he winds them around the fork like spaghetti, and
Yeah,
yeah,
it's just get something in there to fill
yeah,
up that stomach. Yeah,
yeah. Steve has a excellent point here. Even the poorest people here in America have the luxury of choice with food choices, but it's not the same everywhere, and that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Not only that, you were talking about whether you were spoiled or not. I'm not going to point and say, yes, you were, no, you weren't. But we as a society are spoiled in
yeah,
that we have so many choices. We can afford to turn our noses up at certain types of foods
that's right.
because they're not organic or they're not gluten free or fat free, or no, that's got extra sodium. We can afford to turn our noses up at food that other people would give you their children for just to have a bite of, you
Yeah.
know. So we are very, very fortunate and very, very spoiled in that regard. So,
Well, we are. Let's
but
keep it that way, though.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Um, I don't know how we got on that, but Rick has one that I missed. How about pork rinds? The
Love
fattest
them.
portion of a pig, deep fried for more fat and cholesterol.
Love 'em.
Um, I made probably the best decision of my life and the worst decision of my life when I started following a guy on a YouTube channel called Chud's Barbecue. Where he got that name, I don't know. But his name is Brad. He is a Texas pitmaster out of Austin. And he works for a place called Leroy and Lewis, and he is their pit master. And he has shown all kinds of different recipes just cooking in his backyard, how to do the brisket right, how to do ribs right, and all this other good stuff. And he's come up with some excellent, excellent stuff. And he showed, in a video, he has taught me a bunch of stuff. And that pork rinds thing has got me thinking about it, because what I have learned to do is take the beef trimmings when I put a brisket on the smoker.
Yeah.
I'll take the big deckle fat, chop it up, throw it in a pot, put it on the stove, and I
Yeah.
will render down the tallow, and it makes beef cracklings. And oh my
You love it.
God, are they good?
Are you know what? I'm starting to laugh because I was thinking of that one time you said, yeah, and that food was to die for. And then
That
right
was
after you said, you know what? I've never said that sentence in my life, but it was such a good food that you were talking about that you had no
Yes,
choice.
that was my grandmother's on my father's side. That were her apple dumplings. Oh my God. I'd
You said,
kill for some right now.
yeah, you said that one time, but you checked yourself too at the same time. You said,
Yeah, I don't think I've ever said that in my life. Or something like that. Yeah.
it was that good,
It
but yet
was that they were that good. As Jerry Clower used to say, good enough to make a puppy pull a freight train.
dude, no, but seriously, those like poik. Did you hear him? Poik,
Poik.
pork rind. I
Uh-huh.
mixed pork with rind, poik. That's interesting. Those pork rinds are freaking great, dude.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
they're fresh, oh my goodness.
Crunchy and salty. And what else what else do you want? I mean, what else do you want? I mean, I was learning how to make them out of beef, and I was like, but
Man,
then take the beef fat, render out the tallow, and use that to make like biscuits or tortillas or something like that. And
Oh, it's gotta be great.
And what he impressed upon me, and like I said, this has become a curse because now I'm making, salami and getting into sausage making and what have you.
Are you?
Yeah, I made 12 pounds of salami for Christmas, and we
Oh, wow.
have about a half pound of it because the rest of it, everybody else just kind of, you know.
See, that's the
Um,
thing. See, we're going in the direction of like there is no calorie counting now.
well, not around Christmas because I don't think Christmas calories count,
Yeah,
you
they don't.
know. So, and, it wasn't crazy. It's just there's a lot of people. So I made 12 pounds of salami and we have like a half pound of it, but everybody else got like a half pound here and there.
Damn.
So unless they did a bunch of trading on their own, everybody got some. But um, I learned from this guy that all of that stuff you're trimming off when you go to put it on the smoker, you're paying the same amount per pound for that trim that otherwise would get thrown away, that you're paying for the briskets that you're putting on the smoker. So why not take that beef that you're trimming away, which is perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong with it, grind it up and make hamburgers out of it. And I'm telling you, man, brisket hamburgers are excellent.
Damn.
You run it through the grinder, patty it up, throw it in the fridge overnight. Next day, throw it on the barbecue and grill them up. And oh my God, are they good?
Gosh, I'm hungry as we speak. For goodness'
Yeah.
sake. Damn.
So,
I could basically, I could feel the warm heat from the smoke. You started describe. I don't know if it's my imagination, but the way you were describing it, I'm starting to already have visions.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing because now, yeah, I'm not wasting this stuff by throwing it away. I'm, using it and we're eating it and everything, but it's got me so intrigued. Like this 12 pounds of salami I just made. I did it the expensive way. I went down and I bought ground beef. Well, I could go to the restaurant supply. If I had a decent meat grinder, I could go down to the restaurant supply place and I could buy a large, it's called a clod. It's basically a knuckle off of the bowl, around the kneecap and what have you. And there's a lot of beef there. But when you grind it up into burger, it's perfect. It's also it turns you end up paying like 50 cents a pound for hamburger. So it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot better quality.
Yeah.
But now I got to go out and buy a $250 meat grinder.
Right.
And then I want to make sausage, so I've got to add $175 sausage stuffer. And I want a cold smoked cheese, so now I got to buy a cold smoker. So it's a double-edged sword. I've got my eyeballs on a $300 meat slicer. I just haven't pulled the trigger yet, So it's a double-edged sword. We're eating right, but it's expensive to save money.
You could buy a Harbor Freight table saw just for that specific.
You laugh. They make bone saws. It's a bandsaw. It looks like the bandsaw you would have in your wood shop. It's geared the same way a metal bandsaw is, so it moves a bit slower, but it uses surgical stainless blades. That's what butchers break down a cow with, is a bandsaw. And it looks just like the grizzly bandsaw that you'd have in your wood shop. Zip, run them through, cut them up. Yeah. Bradley on this channel, he got a Black & Decker rechargeable battery sawzall, but he got meat blades for it. And that's what he uses to cut up ribs and stuff like that. You whip out the sawzall and go. That's all it's used for. But, it's not like he's, grabbing his neighbors from cutting limbs off a tree or cutting down a fence or something like that. It's just, hey, whatever works.
Oh, by the way, to follow up with that one guy that went to Indonesia, he wanted to go further into the country, and his guide and him went. And he's got a cameraman. He's a two-man operation roughly. I'm sure there's other people back home and stuff, but he goes with his cameraman. And but he's like a regular guy, like we would, that started his YouTube video business, and it became what it became. Sure. He went somewhere so far into the thick and all of a sudden it opens up in this jungle, and there's a whole freaking village somewhere in a corner between China and two other countries there, right in the little corner touching China.
Mm-hmm.
There's this village just sitting smack dab, full of people, and they're just drinking and drinking, and they invite him to drink and drink and drink and drink, and they're constant drinking, and they're jumping in this like laguna or whatever. Well, at one point, he starts to notice that the chief guy or one of the guys, he keeps pushing his daughter in place next to him throughout the whole
Mm-hmm.
course of the whole thing. And he starts to say, man, I think that, he wants me to marry his daughter. And this is, well, at one point, he's like grateful. So he gives money to the guy for the experience of this, and that. And the guy brings his daughter right next to him and
Mm-hmm.
parks her right next to him. And he looks at the camera. Oh crap! I think that did I just get married? And the cameraman, yeah, I think you just got married, dude. He said, the money did I give him a dowry? Was that a dowry? And they're trying to figure it out because they don't speak the language. And the one guy the guide is laughing and this and that. And he does say to her, "I'm sorry, wasn't able to marry your daughter and stuff." And they all look disappointed and stuff.
You're a big son-in-law.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
That's funny.
Yeah,
Uh-oh. Snow crutcher here. Greg. Let's say chainsaw with canola oil chain lube for butchering moose. Hey, you got to carry that big son of a gun. So breaking it down, yeah, I can get it. I can see it. Oh man, yeah. Clash of cultures. I had a cartography teacher when I was in college down in Nevada. It's funny, I can only remember his first name now was Chris. I don't remember his last name. He's done several shows through National Geographic. And one of the things that he did with National Geographic is every summer when he wasn't teaching in the US, he would go to another country. Him and his wife would both go, and they would spend the summer teaching in this other country. And they'd been all over the world. And this was just in talking about how far US popular culture spreads, how far and how fast. Okay, take it easy, Dan. Have a good one. He said one summer they were in Siberia in this little village, and they're walking around, just looking around, and it's fairly modern. It's not like dirt roads or anything like that. I mean, there are cars and traffic lights and everything else, but it was a very small town. And they're walking down the street, and he happens to notice that somebody has taken a big piece of chalk, and on this corner where they're getting ready to cross the street, the graffiti was corn with the K backwards, the
like the
rock
band.
band, the band logo on a sidewalk in a little bitty town in Siberia. And it's just like, holy cow, they've heard of that here.
Amazing.
He was in another town, well, not a town, they were in Cambodia, and they were going from one village to the next, and it just started raining and storming. And they were walking past this hut, and the guy come up to the door, the guy who lived there, and come on. So they go running into the hut. He said he noticed dirt floor, water running under the walls. Everything is about 10 inches up off the floor, and all the chairs and everything. And you stood on these wooden boxes.
That's how they lived.
And that's how they lived, because it just torrentially rained there. They were rice farmers, subsistence farmers, what have you. I think they had an ox or something like that. And trying to talk, trying to communicate. He didn't speak Vietnamese or Cambodian or whatever it is they speak there.
This was
And I don't
Cambodia, I
know.
believe.
This was Cambodia, but I don't know what language they speak there, is what I was getting at. And so the guy yells something, and this girl about 12 years old comes out from another part of the hut, and she starts talking to them in English and did the translations. What got him about it was she was wearing a t-shirt that had Michael Jordan on it. you know, that big leaping pose he does.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, you like Michael Jordan?" And she said, "I don't know who this is."
Yeah.
And he said, "You don't know who Michael Jordan is?" She said, "No, all I know, it's American." And he's a million miles from nowhere, and she's wearing a Michael Jordan t-shirt, had no idea who he was. So he tried to explain it to her. He thinks she got it, didn't know. All she knew was that it was American, and that was good enough for her.
It's incredible. Well, I mean, they also get what they can get.
Mm-hmm. But it's
And
just that the American pop culture has gone so far,
yeah.
so fast, to the most remote place you wouldn't even think about. It's just weird.
Well, you have situations just similar to that, where like in Cuba, you'll
Mhm.
see like in all these videos, you'll see these, and remember they live in a dictatorship
Mhm.
that's well, it's communist. Um, so you would think that this wouldn't happen, but you see the people, and because of their lack of this and that, you'll see them with American shirts,
Mhm.
particularly the American flag, hats, and so it's
Yeah.
kind of like they're fighting. The government is always against the United States and this and that, and yet the people are wearing the clothing that's
Yeah.
it's incredible to see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
American flag,
Mhm.
it could be just all sorts of stuff, and
Oh
you're like,
yeah.
wow.
During the Cold War, it was a big thing. If you had, and I spoke to several soldiers who went over to East Germany to visit relatives of girlfriends or husbands or wives, or just to go as tourists, you could go to certain areas. But every damn one of them said, if you go over into East Germany, take 4 pairs of Levi's with you, because you will only leave with the ones that you're wearing.
Yeah.
They just, if you had a pair of Levi's that you were willing to part with, and they had to be Levi blue jeans. If you had a pair of Levi's you were willing to part with, you could just about drive out of there with a car. They were
Yeah.
that valuable.
Yeah,
So,
they didn't have the access.
mm-hmm.
That to me is pretty much all that needs to be said about that.
Yeah. Well, we better land the plane. We've been on 2 hours, and folks are
That's great.
dropping. They're fading fast.
Well, I mean, we got them hungry probably, and
Yeah, they're looking for brisket burgers now.
all right. Well, listen, this is our 2022 New Year's pre New Year's episode, and so we want to thank you guys for hanging out all these years and the input and conversations we've had. We wish you a happy New Year. Uh, I skipped a whole bunch of stuff that I was supposed to say. We have a show that goes live every Tuesday over here on the YouTube Trampled Underfoot podcast channel, and that goes live Eastern time 9:30 and West Coast Pacific time 6:30. We also have a page over on the Facebooks, and that's Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook. A website as well with our name, trampledunderfootpodcast.com, and you can catch our past episodes that are conserved in our library by pressing the Wayback Machine button. So you can do that and drop that into your audio podcatcher and listen to us while you whistle while you work. And we're also sponsored by
Harneal Media, your one-stop website shop. Hey, check them out, folks. They specialize in websites for makers and the makers community. But you don't have to be a maker. You don't have to be a part of the makers community. Give Steve a call. No, don't give him a call. Go check him out online. Harnealmedia.com. HARNEAL media.com. You won't be sorry. There is absolutely no better way to build or increase your web presence than by having a website. And Harneal Media makes it easy for you. And you're dealing with Steve. You're not dealing with some nameless, faceless person in a call center somewhere. You will deal with Steve. He will set you up and make it easy. That's harnealmedia.com, sponsor of the Trampled Underfoot podcast.com website.
All right. Well, listen, we thank you guys for hanging out. Enjoy yourselves. Be safe. And we will catch you next year. I think we fall into the next year, yeah?
Yeah.
With the next one, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Our
It's
next episode will be Tuesday, January 3rd.
the 3rd. So be safe. Don't do any crazy stuff unless you get
Yeah.
the itch to do so, but keep it under control.
Yeah, leave that to the amateurs.
Yeah. All right. Laters. Peace.
Peace.
Did I take both of them?